Something like this has never happened to me before, and I don't know that it'll ever happen again. You should definitely check it out. Hi everyone and welcome. My name is Chris and this is Northgarden Comics. I've got a very special episode for you today, one that I have been looking forward to filming for a very long time and thankful that I finally got everything together to be able to share this content with you. You know, as a collector, I've got a few fantasies that I indulge. One is that I'd be driving down the road and see someone have trash at the curb, and in that trash would be some long boxes of comics, and I would swoop over, throw those boxes in my car, and just like that, I'd have some amazing new books added to my collection. Another one is that someone would say something to me like, "Hey Chris, you know, I used to collect comics, but I'm not really into them anymore, and I know you love them, so do you want my collection?" Well, that one actually happened to me. This is a collection that belonged to my brother-in-law. It was his childhood adolescent collection, and he is a few years older than me, so that means he started collecting a few years before me. His collection consisted largely of Marvel books that dated from the mid to late 80s to the early to almost mid 90s, I think is about when he stopped collecting. He had very similar tastes as me, so there are several duplicates of books that I already have in my collection that I got when I was a kid, but then there's a bunch of new things as well. And there are some holes that I've been able to fill because of this gift. There are runs that I wasn't even working on, but because I was introduced to those titles through this gift, I have subsequently started building out those runs. There are also some really cool keys that I'm very excited to share with you as well, so something additional to look forward to. There are a little over 400 books to show you. Because of that, I am going to divide this video into two parts. And let me pan down here and give you a quick look here at the collection. So this is it right here, these two long boxes. This box on the left is all non-mutant books, and the one on the right here is all mutant-related titles. And when I divided them up that way, it was pretty even, so it seemed like a logical way to divide the video. Before we dive in, I just have to say one more time, Christian, thank you so much for this gift. You know, it's still giving me excitement and joy, and I'm happy to be able to share this now with others, so cannot express to you enough my appreciation and gratitude. It is a once-in-a-lifetime type of an opportunity and occurrence. So that being said, let me shuffle a few things around behind me so we can get set up and dive in and show you these books. All right, deep breath everybody. We're about to dive in here and get through these books. Kind of this show and tell. Hopefully I can do a lot more showing and less telling to help this go through with some speed and efficiency here. Okay, Nom number 2. Got some Amazing Spider-Man 263. That is the first appearance of Normie Osborn. Got a ASM 328, Todd McFarlane cover art and interior art, and I believe this is the final issue of Todd McFarlane's run on art on that title. This was pretty cool. The Amazing Spider-Man Annual number 21 from 1987. He had both the Spider-Man cover and the Peter Parker cover, an example of a book that, you know, I would not have picked up, and who knows, probably still wouldn't have to this day if it weren't for him gifting those to me. Avengers Annual number 16 from 1987. Couple issues here from the first Avengers volume, number 215 and 216. Sorry about the glare there. Got a West Coast Avengers Annual number 2, also from 1987. Who knows, maybe he was into the annuals that year. Got a Black Knight number 1 of 4 limited series. I also had this number 1, and since then I have gotten numbers 2, 3, 4. Just because that's the completionist in me. Cosmic Powers Unlimited starring the Silver Surfer. Cool cover there. Little Damage Control number 1, also of 4 in a limited series. Damage Control, those are the folks who clean up after all the superhero shenanigans and battles are over. Doctor Strange. I'm not a collector of Doctor Strange, so these two issues just kind of float randomly in my collection. Doctor Strange number 31 and 36. Then we get over into some Fantastic Four. He had a couple earlier issues. Number 173 here. You can see somebody wrote like a a date or something on the cover. Just cool to have these, though. Jumping up to number 244, part of the John Byrne run on Fantastic Four. Same with number 282. I think I'm working on getting the whole John Byrne run. I think he ended around like 293 or something, I want to say. 288. 325. Jumping ahead to 337, some Walt Simonson art there. Like his stuff as well. 338. 339. 340. Here's an example. I mentioned before that there are some instances where he had the newsstand edition, I had the direct, or I had the direct, or he had the direct and I had the newsstand. This was an example where he had both. I'm going to have to ask him someday if he was purposefully trying to get both direct and newsstand copies of some of these back then. I don't know if those were as big a deal for collectors at that time. Maybe they were. I wasn't paying that close attention then. 341. 342. Some gigantic weaponry there on 343. And 351. And then an annual, number 23 from 1990. This, I believe, first appearance of Ahab. There on the cover. All right. This is Silver Surfer number 4, great classic cover, but it's fantasy masterpieces, so these are reprints of that first volume of Silver Surfer. I don't have any of that first volume of Silver Surfer, though I'd love to have them. For now, I'm completely content to settle with the fantasy masterpieces reprints. You can find them pretty cheap, and sometimes you can find them even in pretty decent condition, so that was a cool addition. And another example of one where I wasn't collecting these, but because of this one, that jump-started my desire to have the rest of them. And I think as of today, I might have, 3 or 4 holes at the top end of that I still need to fill in. Some Ghost Rider from early 90s. This was around the time, Jim Lee's run on the X-Men. You got a Jim Lee cover here. So he was an X-Men fan, as was I. So we had some crossover action going there with Ghost Rider. And G.I. Joe, I was into the cartoon, but never did the toys and never did the comic book. I had a handful of the first volume of comics, and I had some of these special missions. He had several more. Another instance where his gift prompted me to fill out the rest of this volume. You can find these G.I. Joe special missions pretty inexpensively and in pretty good condition. I think there were 26, 27 or so issues in this volume. And you can see he had several. They got me started on this, and I've been able to complete that since then. Guardians of the Galaxy, I have the first 5 issues that I got back when this volume came out, and then he had number 24. Another limited series, Saga of the original Human Torch. He had number 1, and that was it, but I've since grabbed numbers 2, 3, 4. And we got some Hulk. Crossing over with X Factor there on 391, 392. Now we got the next few books are some pretty cool additions. As I mentioned, that there were not just runs, but there were some cool keys in here. He was an Infinity Gauntlet fan. Love that cover. That's classic. I did not have the full Infinity Gauntlet run when it came out. I have a few of the issues, but not all of them. And he had all but one. And so some of these are duplicates for me, but some of them also enabled me to complete my run on this this classic series. So he had number 1, number 2, 3. He did not have 4, and then he had 5 and 6. So that right there was a great gift as part of this collection to add that. Then some Iron Man 212 with the Marvel 25th anniversary border. And then a number 213. Then we get into some Marvel Age. I had several of these issues, again, when they came out. They're in comic format, but they're preview type magazines. They have interviews and other sample pages and things like that. And this one is a preview of Thanos Quest, and I think, you know, it was just a couple years ago that these were added to the Overstreet comic price guide, and I think since then they have started to gain some value, some of those key issues. Slide on in here the next stack. All right, so Marvel Comics Presents. I had, like I said, another example where I had some of these, but not a lot. He was definitely a Wolverine Weapon X fan, and so this has got me to want to get the rest of this Weapon X story. You can find these Weapon X issues for the most part pretty inexpensively. The challenge for me has been finding them in good condition. You know, a lot of times you get some miscoloring here in the number area. These white parts and the inside pages are usually worn. Maybe the books were not even bagged or boarded for a long time, so I try to hold out and find them in better condition when I can. That's a, I don't know, that cover freaks me out. 93. And this artist here, I didn't look into this artist before filming this, but it's definitely a unique style. I don't know, obviously people who know this artist would know that signature there. But did a lot of these covers later in this volume. Got some Ghost Rider here. Another thing about these higher numbered issues is that the covers, it wasn't necessarily a wraparound cover, but you'd have artwork on both the front and the back, which is also pretty cool. And then we move over here, Marvel Saga, another volume. I wasn't collecting, I had never heard of it, but as you can see from the subtitle, it's the official history of the Marvel Universe. It's more of a prose style with some pictures that they pulled from the original comics to help tell the story. And they go through and do origins and backstories of different significant characters and tell about first meetings of different characters. Like 25 or so issues in this volume. He had several, and so that, again, jump-started my desire to have all of them. And I've since been able to put these together, again, pretty inexpensively. I think there's one in the back here, yeah. Number 10 there. Whoop, sorry. And then it jumps way ahead to number 25. This may be the last issue in the volume. Got just one issue here, Marvel Tales, starring Spider-Man, guest starring Tigra, number 203. Cool older book here. Marvel's Greatest, I don't know if it's comic or comics, starring the Fantastic Four, number 37. And then we've got a mini-series. He had the whole thing. It's Mephisto. Number 1 is versus Fantastic Four. And then versus X-Factor. Versus the X-Men. And then last but not least, versus the Avengers. All right, if you've been collecting since the 80s, 90s kind of era, you're very familiar with these types of books, these official handbooks that they've done, these indices of different characters. This one's real beat up. I'm not sure what the story is behind this, why it's in such, you know, poor condition, if he got it this way or what, but that's just kind of a number 1 there. And then he had a bunch of these, well, maybe not a bunch, I should say, but this deluxe edition. And man down. And that, folks, is why we put backing boards in our bags, to prevent falls like that from damaging the book itself. Number 3, they did, you know, thick square bound versions of some of these official handbooks. You know, here's a later one, Book of the Dead Deluxe Edition, number 16. I think this is the same volume as those issues you were just seeing. Same here, number 18. From my own collection from this time, I had the most of this Update 89, but he only had number 8. Then we get over to Marvel Index of the X-Men. Could have included these in the mutant books, but I did not. I put them with just the handbooks. We got original Ghost Rider. Here's another, you know, just kind of interesting tidbit. My wife and I, while we didn't know each other as kids, we grew up in the same hometown, and like I said, her brother is a few years older than me, and we had the same stomping grounds. And you know, this place here says toys on the sticker, video on the Ritz. That was a local video store. We're talking like almost pre-Blockbuster, where it was just a mom and pop type of a VHS video store. And for the life of me, I can't remember seeing comic books in places like this, but they must have been there. Got some Peter Porker, Spider-Ham. A little bit of Power Pack action here, number 20, 28, and 32. And then a little bit of Cyforce from the New Universe, Annual number 1. All right, making good progress here. Here's Robin number 2. Love that hologram. I was always a sucker for the hologram. I guess I still am, though they don't do them as much anymore. Number 1. Got some RoboCop. I remember when that movie came out. Thought it was super cool. And I did have some of these comics. And there's number 2. Here's one I had never heard of before getting this book, but I've seen it, several times since then. It's the Origin of Galactus there. And that was pretty cool to have. Got some Secret Wars 2, number 4, 5, and then 9. And I have since put the rest of this series together. Some Silver Sable in the Wild Pack. I have 2 of these now. I got one in a mystery box from Mile High Comics not too long ago. Right now we're getting into some Silver Surfer. He had a bunch of Silver Surfer. One of the biggest runs, I think, that at least non-mutant runs that he had collected at the time. And I was also a fan of the Silver Surfer, so we had a lot of duplicates, but again, a lot of new things, like this one right here. This is new to me as of this gift. And also, you'll see there's several examples here where maybe he had a newsstand edition and I had a direct, or vice versa. But there's I think this was just the only, it's the only issue in this volume. Depending on where you look, I think some call that volume 2. I don't know. Got a few annuals. He had number 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I think I only had 2 myself, so that gave me 2 duplicates and 2 new ones. And then we get into the actual volume itself here. I wouldn't say he didn't have a complete run. I think this volume lasted for 100, maybe 50 or so issues, and it looked like he stopped collecting before it ever made it to the end of that volume. But he did have many for the time that he was collecting, so a pretty solid run here. And he had 2 issues, I should say 2 copies of number 1, both direct edition. I don't remember if my copy that I had already was a newsstand or a direct. All right, and as we continue through this run here, let me adjust this just a little bit, get more of the cover there. I guess I tell you the story more specifically about how I got this collection. So my wife and I went out west to visit my brother-in-law, her brother, and his wife and their kids. And usually when I travel, I try to hit local comic stores just because it's a fun thing to do. And so I was doing that, but then one evening while we were at the house just hanging out, my brother-in-law brings out 2, largish size boxes and says, "Here, take a look at these," and shows me, and it's this comic collection. A lot of things were bagged and boarded, some were just bagged, some were nothing at all. And he basically said, "Hey, if there's anything in here you want, let me know." And of course, that for a collector, that can almost give you a heart attack because of the excitement it can induce. And the biggest thing I had to do was figure out, well, how do I tell them that I want all of them? without even looking through them. I knew I wanted every single one of them, and he had no problem with that. He was like, "Sure, take whatever you want. You can have the whole thing." Real quick, here's another example. He had both a direct and a newsstand edition. I'm going to have to ask him one of these days if that was something he was purposefully doing or how he wound up with both of those copies, because I wasn't paying attention to that type of a distinction at that time, so I don't remember if that was a big deal or not at the time. But yeah, he said, he wasn't into them anymore. He knew I loved them, and so he was happy to give them a new home. And so I have become the caretaker. Oh, there's one on the back there too. For all of these comics, and I love to have them. Again, I'm so grateful to him. This is like a once in a lifetime type of an occurrence where someone has something like this and just says, "Here, take it. And as we go through here, one of the things I want to point out, I'm not opening any of these to show you, but some of these have been bagged and boarded since he got them. So we're talking, early 90s. So you're talking like 30 years they've been bagged and boarded, and most of them, there's no Mylar in any of these, on any of these. You got mostly polypropylene. Some of them may have had the polyethylene, kind of that softer, you can feel the difference when you touch it. And I don't want to open a can of worms and get into a big bag board type of a debate. But, I want to show you one more book here. Here's one, he had 2 copies, newsstand and direct. This is, I think the Thanos comes back to life here. And I did have one of these as well, so a couple duplicates there. But when we start to talk bags and boards, like I said, a lot of these he had in the same bag with the same board. Some of them were even double booked. So he had one in the front, one in the back. And we're not talking Mylar bag, and we're not talking a fully acid-free backing board. We're talking the kind that's just coated on one side. And so he had a book on the wrong side of the backing board. And so many of the cases, or all of the cases actually in this collection, there was no damage to the books. Yeah, the bag got wavy after all that time, but there was no ink transfer from the back cover, which is very common to see in some of these bagged and board situations. We've all, well, not all, but maybe you've seen that in your own collecting. This was a really cool key. This is the first appearance of the Infinity Gauntlet. I did not have this issue, so really happy to have it. It's not in the best condition. You can see there's some black, something rubbed on here in some of these places. I don't know if this book was in a bag or a board when I got it, but again, even though it's not in, what some may consider like gradable condition, still super cool to have that key because it cost me nothing. But what I want to say, really, my point on the bags and boards, I took some of these out that were, 2 books in a polypropylene bag with a non-fully acid-free backing board, and there was no ink transfer, pages nice and white and crisp, no damage whatsoever. And I guess the only point I want to say is that for me, and I have books in my own collection that are very similar, they've been in the same bag for decades, and it's not Mylar, and there's no damage on them. So some may say that's lucky. What I think, though, is that as important as your bag and board is, I think just as important, and maybe even more important, I don't know, is the environment and those conditions that you store your books in. So if the temperature is extreme one way or another, or the humidity is high, I think that's going to put your books at a much higher risk than if you've got a nice, moderate temperature environment with low humidity. So you've got no moisture and there's no light affecting those books. So just to say, bags and boards, important, but don't forget the environment in which you keep your books, because that can make a huge difference one way or another. All right, we're getting almost to the end of this Silver Surfer run here. Like I said, he had higher numbers than I did at the time. That's where that one ends there. He had up to number 70. And like I said, I think I have up to number 75 now. This is another pretty famous now 2-part limited series written by Stan Lee. Art by, is it Mobius? But he had both numbers 1 and 2. I did have these as well, but just cool to have another set of that. Great story. Cool art. Now we get some Spider-Man. So here we go. Todd McFarlane art number 1. Nothing really significant about this cover in the sense that, there were several variants and certain color combinations are more valuable than others. He just had the standard cover. And I think I had a couple. I have one that's in the poly bag still, and a couple of the different color schemes, but he just had the basic number 1 there. He had number 2, and then jumping ahead, number 16, got this sideways cover with X-Force. And then number 17. Got some Web of Spider-Man, just this one though, annual number 1. He had a couple of these star brands from the new universe. One of, I think, maybe 2 Superman books. I don't have a lot of DC in my collection, and he was not a big DC collector either, apparently. So he had this, Superman number 411. And then World of Smallville, number 1. Got some Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Adventures, number 1. And then this is number 2, but I think this may actually be a different volume because number 1 was from August, number 2 is from May. So I think they may actually be, maybe they're 2 different volumes. Here's a really significant, well, relative to this collection, significant key. Comic Relief, that was a comic store that he and I both shopped at. Again, didn't know each other, but there weren't, a ton of comic shops in the area, and that was the go-to shop, or one of the go-to shops. But Thanos Quest, he had both number 1 and number 2. Again, very, very good condition. I had only number 1 from when I was a kid. So cool to be able to complete that, and now I've got a duplicate, and he paid a whole $1.25 for each of those. And actually, it looks like these were originally, that's not even true, Silver Surfer 43 and Silver Surfer 42, looks like, based on the stickers, what was originally in there. Alright, we got some Vision and the Scarlet Witch, number 6 of this 12-issue limited series. Got a Warlock, number 1. And then a Warlock in the Infinity Watch, 1, 2, and 3. And then this What If series, I collected this too. This was one of the issues I did not have, I think. I have like the first, in the first 17, but this one I did not have. And he had, again, newsstand and direct edition of this one. And then the last book I wanted to show you in this pile, actually I saved the highest value one for last, not necessarily the best, but the best key for last. He had, you saw before, he had Secret Wars 2 in this collection, had a handful of those issues. He only had 1 issue from the very first Marvel Superhero Secret Wars, and believe it or not, the only issue he had was number 8. So I could not believe it that he had that, the origin of the black costume. And yeah, again, I would not have this book today if it weren't for this gift, because most of the books I buy are in that $1, $2 range, and I've never forked out big dollars for a key. So this was one of the only ways I was ever going to get this book. So fantastic to have that in my collection. It's not in perfect condition, but it's in pretty darn good condition. So I have 0 complaints about that. So that's the most significant key that was in these non-mutant books, and wanted to save that one for last. And that's going to wrap up the non-mutant books. Well, that's going to do it for me. I hope you enjoyed part 1 of this comic collection gift that I received. Next time, I'll post part 2 showing all of the mutant-related books from this collection. If you like content like this, check out this video here where I show the books I picked up at a garage sale, filling in runs and some cool keys, all for $1 a piece. Also, please like, subscribe, leave me a comment down below, and ring that notification bell to get notified each time I post new content, like part 2 of this comic haul. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.